Kelly and Workman. Everyone knew who the criminals were when Kelly and Workman was discovered. Yet it took 35 years for someone to come forward and dare accuse the bullies responsible. Stanley and Joan Workman, farmers, welcomed Kelly and into the world in 1965. They lived in Seymour, Missouri's Douglas County. Stanley spent 19 years working at Daco Corporate, but his true passion was farming and taking care of his dairy herd. Mark and Pam Workman were Kelly's two siblings. Ames, her infant brother, Matthew Workman, died at a young age. She was a peaceful, well-mannered kid who lived with her parents. She had blonde hair and green eyes. Kelly frequently performed garden and house maintenance for local Dogwood residents. For around 3 years, she manicured the Dogwood Cemetery's lawn. In this region, it was not unusual for a young lady to take care of a cemetery and for her to work late into the night. She was not afraid of the graveyard. However, it turned into a nightmare for her family on June 30th, 1989, when Kelly just vanished while working late into the night. Kelly's parents thought she was running a bit late at first, but as supper time drew near and she was unable to be found, they started to get worried. Their daughter was not usually out this late without warning. Shauna Beebe, Kelly's cousin, recalls that day very clearly when Joan Workman hurried to their house in a panic, alerting Kelly's uncle and father of her disappearance. The days that followed were characterized by an intensely emotional and chaotic event. Family and friends came together, organizing search teams and clinging to hope as each hour went by. Their concern turned into worry, and they called the police. A massive search that covered Douglas County started. Kelly's last known sighting was at 5:40 p.m. while she was cutting the lawn at Douglas County's Dogwood Cemetery. This is close to her place of employment, the Southern Baptist Church. At the intersection of Z and Highway 14, her uncle saw her working diligently, but by 6:15, he was unable to see her anymore, so she either departed or was taken somewhere else. Kelly's sister Pam Workman lived roughly 200 miles away in Kansas City, Missouri at the time. The 22-year-old was going about her day. She was unable to fathom the catastrophe that would befall her family. A knock on Pam's flat door on July 1st disturbed her morning routine. Her aunt and uncle were standing there, worried expressions on their faces. They brought the breaking news that Kelly was missing, which would change Pam's life irrevocably. Even though Pam's travel back to Douglas County wasn't very long, it seemed to go on forever. Every mile served as an agonizing reminder of her sister's absence and the family's impending uncertainty. The Laborer family gathered in prayer and concern for Kelly's whereabouts for several days. The fact that barely 2/3 of the lawn had been mowed and Kelly's keys were in the ignition of the car was the most perplexing thing. The lawnmower was switched off, but still fully fueled. She was interrupted. The detectives concluded and was not to be robbed. It's possible she was abducted. Heartbreak overwhelmed the relief when Kelly was eventually located. Sadly for Kelly's family, a week after her kidnapping, her body was found. Kelly was 24 years old. Over 10 miles after her last sighting in the Mark Twain National Forest near Oldfield, her body was found submerged in a creek. For two of Kelly's uncles who were present at the moment, the revelation was especially terrifying. Authorities were unable to pinpoint the precise cause of her death because of the speed at which her body decomposed. After taking an X-ray of her, they discovered no signs of a head injury or bullet wounds. They surmised that she had probably passed away on the evening of June 30th or July 1st. AM often believed that her sister's case did not receive the attention it required. Her grief and annoyance were further exacerbated by this feeling of neglect. Still, optimism lingered. Pam held fast to the hope that justice would eventually be done, not just for Kelly, but for all the families that suffer because of a cold case. Pam was adamant that Kelly was a victim of excessive knowledge. She may have heard something regarding money or illegal substances while working at Dogwood's store on certain days. This also provides motive. The offender felt compelled to silence her. Although Pam feels that the police did not do much, there was another issue with the investigation. They lacked the means to prosecute the 3 suspects they had. They provided alibis during the interrogation. During a conference on July 10, 1989, law enforcement officials acknowledged that they lacked physical leads in this case. Participants in the conference included members from the Missouri State Highway Patrol's Springfield and Willow Springs offices, as well as the sheriff's departments of Christian County and Douglas County. They just did not have enough evidence, even with all their resources together. The laborers openly called on people to take action and pleaded with any witnesses to come forward. On July 13, 1989, they made a $10,000 incentive offer. When Kelly went missing, they had first offered it, but now they were asking people to come forward with knowledge about what had happened to her tragically. For months into the investigation, on October 20th, the Douglas County Sheriff acknowledged that not much had changed. The department eliminated circumstances, evidence, and suspects as it carried out its inquiry. On the case, they possessed nothing. When the Workmans made a tiny progress, they felt hope. On December 30th, 1989, Joan Workman, Kelly's mother, was sporadically reviewing the day's events with her family. She received a crucial piece of information from a friend or member of another family that they had either forgotten or failed to disclose. For days after Kelly was kidnapped, a friend of Kelly's contacted to report that they had seen a man at the Workman's house the afternoon Kelly vanished. Unfortunately, neither the witness nor the intruder was identified, but at least it indicated that someone had witnessed something. This was a really interesting turn of events due to threats and coercion. This person never reported anything to the police. Kelly was most likely someone Kelly knew well, since Jones firmly felt that if the offender had been a stranger, Kelly would have fought back. However, the month soon became a year. Another statement was published by the sheriff's office. They were sure that Kelly's case would be resolved since there was someone out there who had vital information. Leonard Dwight Banks and Bobby Lee Banks, the notorious Banks brothers of the area, were the prime suspects. Bobby Lee Banks was given a polygraph test in August 1990 at the Missouri State Highway Patrol's request. It should come as no surprise that he failed the exam, which his lawyer said was caused by a lack of feeling. Their lawyer advised them not to make any public statements at the time because of the intense media attention. The police also requested that his brother, Dwight Banks, submit to a polygraph examination. The brothers lived in Seymour and had been seen about town. Dwight consented to take the polygraph exam, during which the researcher asked him 3 key questions. First of all, did he murder Kelly and Workman? Does he then know who killed her? Finally, did he appear to be under the effect of illicit substances? Unlike his brother, Dwight said no to every inquiry, and the examiner concluded that he was telling the truth. Additionally, the police learned that on the day Kelly vanished, a young male was spotted in the cemetery. Later in the day, the burned-out truck belonged to this man. This man was probably involved, and his friends burned the truck and threatened him. For a while, everything was silent. 2 years later, in October 1992, Joan received a call from an elderly person who identified herself as a lady. This person thought Kellyanne's death was related to the woman and her partner, a licensed narcotic dealer. The caller's name was never discovered, and the woman and her boyfriend had alibis. Thus, this seeming lead was meaningless. However, in the interim, White's former partner revealed that he had requested her to provide an alibi on the night Kelly died. Authorities were still in the dark 6 years after Kelly and Workman's decomposing body was found. According to Christian County Sheriff Steve Whitney, there were no findings from a grand jury probe. Stanley Workman, Kelly's father, thought more than one person was involved in her kidnapping and murder, but he had no evidence. When a fresh lead surfaced in the middle of July 1995, the investigation was reopened. Sheriff Whitney hinted that he had suspects, but he would not elaborate. Whitney underlined the difficulty of assembling a strong case, despite his confidence in knowing the identity of the attacker. Another interesting lead emerged as the investigation went on. Additionally, Bobby and Dwight Banks were named as suspects in Kelly's murder by July 1996. Kelly was working at the Dogwood store a few hours before she was abducted, as Dwight Banks had admitted to seeing her with his brother Bobby. However, he claimed that neither his brother nor he was involved in our tragedy or the kidnapping. Actually, he and Bob were having fried chicken at his house when she had vanished. Investigators had good grounds to suspect that Dwight had used illegal drugs, like Valium or relaxants, to help him pass the polygraph exam that his brother had failed. While Kelly's case was going through all of this, on July 16, 1996, a bomb was discovered at the workman's residence. The explosive was defused by police, the Jefferson City Bomb Squad, and officers from both counties. On Jones' car's hood was where the explosive was discovered. It was found at 5:30 a.m. with a menacing writing on it. When the squad set the bomb's timer off at midday, they discovered no explosive materials. It was just supposed to frighten the family. Rita Sanders, a 17-year law enforcement veteran, thought she knew who killed Kelly and Workman. They assisted in disposing of the body. 2 were from Seymour, and the third was from a rural area near Fordland. She mentioned that just before Kelly vanished, 2 suspects were spotted close to the crime scene. Rita thought they had the case solved, but time and manipulated evidence made her dubious they would ever face justice. Remarkably, Rita was let go from the force in that same year. Rita informed the laborers that as Kelly valiantly struggled for her life, a witness observed her being violently placed into a pickup. When a man from Ava came forward and admitted to the crime in December 1998, things really got going. He also named 2 other males as suspects, but no one was taken into custody. Wiley Belt was an accomplice and witness. DNA testing warrants were served to Dwight Banks in Seymour and Wiley Belt in Foreland on June 9, 1999 in relation to Kelly and Workman's death. However, neither guy was charged or detained and the test results were never made public. In an interview, Wiley Belt said he didn't know the Banks brothers and that he wasn't terrified of the testing. He claimed that since he saw Kelly at the Dogwood store that day, someone must have noticed him there. Thus, the case was forgotten for many years. No fresh leads were available. A few of the cops who were involved retired and the photographic proof was destroyed. While grocery shopping, Kelly's sister Pam once ran into Dwight Banks. He wanted to get into a fight with her because it was a bad experience. Kelly and Workman's case was given to investigators Christopher Holland and Leslie Albrecht in 2021. The case has long been regarded as open. The 2 were employed by the Senior Services Bureau of Special Investigations and the Department of Health at the time. In Southwest Missouri, they were given caseloads related to dependent adult abuse and elder abuse. Albrecht and Holland did not have a meeting with the eyewitnesses until the 2nd year of their investigation. In the end, they contributed vital information that strengthened the case against Belt and Bank brothers. Soon after this information was made public, an indictment was filed. However, Stanley Workman died on September 11, 2022, before he could witness the offenders being brought to justice. A Douglas County grand jury indicted Leonard Dwight Banks of Gainesville, 64, and Bobby Banks, 65, on February 20, 2024. Furthermore, Ava's 64-year-old Wiley Belt is responsible for Kelly and Workman's 1989 murder, assault, and kidnapping. Each of the men had a $250,000 cash bail that kept them detained at the Douglas County Jail. At their arraignments, the 3 men entered not guilty pleas. Attorneys attempted to persuade the court to grant Dwight Banks some mercy in light of his diabetes and pancreatic cancer struggles. Since all 3 of the charges are first-degree offenses, the maximum sentence for each is life in prison. Moving on to the next case. Felicia McGuire on October 7, 2007, 32-year-old Felicia McGuire disappeared, leaving her friends and family in shock. The last place witnesses saw her alive was in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston. The police conducted extensive investigations and large-scale searches. She was never found, though. Her disappearance occurred under odd circumstances, and the police were notified of suspicious activities involving a person of interest. However, the investigation was quickly concluded, leaving Felicia's loved ones without any closure. Welcome back to Mystery Detective, the place where mysteries remain unanswered. We want to look at Felicia McGuire's mysterious disappearance today. It took 15 years for this case to be resolved, and justice was finally served in 2023. Before we go any further, if you're new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, do so. Your support will motivate us to keep creating films for you like this one. That stated, without further ado, let's get straight into this mystery. The southern part of the city is home to the Dorchester neighborhood in Boston, Massachusetts. Almost 6 square miles make up the entire land area, making it the largest neighborhood in Boston. In Dorchester, there are more than 90,000 residents of many ethnic backgrounds, such as African Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Caribbean Americans, and Irish Americans. The Boston neighborhood of Dorchester is now growing quickly due to new residential and commercial building. This is the region in which the case under review occurs. Felicia McGuire was born in the charming city of Dorchester in 1975. It is unknown who her father is, although Sharon McGuire was her mother when she was growing up. Felicia grew up in a happy, loving, and humorous home during her early years. In 1997, she gave birth to her lone child, Nicholas Fahey. Nicholas became the center of her existence with the birth of her son. Nicholas's father's identity and the circumstances surrounding his death were unclear. Felicia was never away from Dorchester. Despite the challenges and setbacks life threw at her, she stayed there with her beloved kid and her mother, creating a happy and caring household. Felicia had a romantic involvement with a man named David Pena over time. She and him were also housemates. Felicia was a single parent, but it didn't stop her from being devoted to her child's well-being. She worked non-stop to provide her child with the best life imaginable. She went above and above to provide her son the support and care he needed. Felicia McGuire was a selfless and caring mother who put her child's needs ahead of her own. The difficulties in life never broke her spirit. Unfortunately, on October 7, 2007, Felicia McGuire vanished without a trace, ending her mother's hopes and dreams of seeing her kids succeed and become a wonderful member of society. The 32-year-old loving mother was last observed in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts, where she resided. She was last seen on Rixton Street going about her business, but no one knows what happened to her. Felicia's mother, Sharon, was horrified to learn that her daughter had vanished, and things got worse when it became unclear where Felicia was. She searched through phone books and any possible contact she could think of, but her efforts were in vain. Felicia's friends and family worried more and more as the days went by because she never spoke with them. On October 18, 2007, after a 10-day period, Sharon McGuire formally reported her daughter missing. Her disappearance prompted the Boston Police Department to launch an inquiry right away. They quickly discovered that Felicia had stopped talking to her cherished son and other family members, and that her behavior was abnormal. This made others wonder if she had been the victim of a horrific crime. Felicia's family was quite worried about her safety and well-being, because it was not in her nature to disappear without anyone. They pondered what had happened to her and where she could be. The residual uncertainty concerning her destiny had to be faced by her son and family. Law enforcement officials worked very hard as the inquiry went on to try to uncover any information that would lead them to the answer. To put together a timeline of Felicia's last known movements, police spoke with neighbors, acquaintances, and family members. The neighborhood, including any nearby woods and bodies of water, was thoroughly searched in an attempt to locate the missing woman. As the days grew into weeks and those weeks into months, Felicia's family grew increasingly concerned. Their constant concern was the whereabouts of their beloved mother and daughter. Her disappearance also disturbed the Boston Police Department. In November 2013, they shared images of Felicia McGuire on social media in an attempt to gather any information that might help return her home safely due to the lack of information. In the social media posts, they provided a detailed description of her. The police highlighted her personal attributes such as her height, weight, hair color, and eye color, and expressed serious concerns for her safety and well-being. Felicia was a beautiful woman with piercing, vibrant eyes, and chestnut brown hair. She had a medium frame, weighing about 140 pounds, and stood slender at 5 feet, 2 inches. Felicia had been absent for over 6 arduous years, and the mystery surrounding her disappearance became more intricate with every passing day. Her body had never been found, even after a great deal of time and money had been spent looking for leads. Nevertheless, a number of witnesses' accounts of Felicia's disappearance remained doubtful after the 2013 Facebook post. The police were informed by an unidentified witness that David Pena, Felicia McGuire's live-in lover, showed up at his door early on October 7, 2007, seeking for a trip to his mother's Devon Street home. The witness claimed to have lived below Pena and Felicia's flat. Blood on his clothes was observed by the neighbor. However, Pina had stated at the time that Felicia had stabbed him with scissors. Still, the blood on Pina's shirt hinted at much more horrific events. The witness stated that Pina told him that he had violently shoved Felicia against the wall during their altercation, causing her head to hit the bed or dresser. Subsequently, Pina expressed uncertainty about her survival and appeared indifferent to her destiny. Pina was still being observed by the witness. He said that Pina had swelling in her right hand as well. Pina replied that Felicia had struck him with a baseball bat when asked why. A few days later, 2 other witnesses claimed to have seen Pina come back to the flat that same evening. They said that that day, about 3 or 4 in the morning, Payne came home with another man and went upstairs. They reappeared after a while, hauling down the stairs a blanket that might have held Felicia McGuire's body. When the 2 witnesses tried to help, they were ordered to mind their own business and turned away. To further cloud the picture, a second witness stated that in 2007, he had lent Pena his 2005 Chevy Impala in return for drugs, and that year he had returned it with the back seat completely cleaned and broken. These unsettling clues cast doubt on what truly happened to Felicia McGuire and prompted the authorities to suspect David Pena as the investigation progressed. Investigators questioned David Pena about the matter right away. They also learned that he and Felicia had a turbulent past. Pena informed detectives that, during Felicia McGuire's disappearance, he was her live-in lover, and that their relationship was anything from simple. The police questioned Pena since he had previously told the first witness who had called in that he and Felicia had gotten into a violent brawl at their flat. Then he acknowledged that Felicia had stabbed him in the shoulder when she assaulted him with a pair of scissors. In response, Pena fled the flat to seek refuge at his mother's place. However, upon returning a few days later, he discovered something unexpected. Felicia was gone and her possessions had been pilfered. Because Pena did not provide any damning statements and there was no evidence against him during the interrogation, the detectives were compelled to release Pena. After that, Felicia's death inquiry became a tortuous trip with many twists and turns that ultimately led to every conceivable dead end. Every lead was followed up on. Every piece of evidence was scrutinized. Yet the case got colder by the day. Felicia's friends and family were in unbearable pain and were in desperate need of an explanation for her disappearance. The beloved mother, Felicia McGuire, vanished in 2007, and her whereabouts have been the subject of speculation and rumors for years. New optimism was sparked in 2017 when the FBI searched a highly forested region of West Roxbury. Days of covert investigation were followed by no information being given to the media, leaving people to wonder what had led the officials to that spot. In the end, the truth was revealed. In fact, the search was connected to Felicia's disappearance, and the investigation was a crucial step in the lengthy process of discovering the truth. During the search, a witness came forward and shockingly revealed to the detectives that in 2007, David Pena had asked for help getting things out of his flat, including a bulky rolled-up carpet. He continued by saying that before sped off, Pena and his accomplice had put Felicia's body in the trunk of a car. This was witnessed by someone who said that he suspected right away that a body was wrapped in the blanket and carpet. Sadly, his presumptions were correct. Pena was eventually able to bring Felicia's body into a wooded location with a parking lot, where they dumped Felicia's body with the witnesses' help. The only thing standing in the way of the investigators finishing the case was locating Felicia's body's disposal site. Nevertheless, despite multiple leads and witnesses, the answer to this seemed to be a mystery that would never be solved. The witness left the area before finding out what had happened to her remains. The witness's lack of knowledge of Boston made matters worse, since she was unable to provide any ideas as to where the body might have been disposed of. McGuire's family and loved ones had been given a frustratingly inadequate picture of the crime, and the prosecutor was unable to bring them closure. A few years later, on January 14, 2023, David Pena was apprehended at the Baker County Detention Center in Florida by the Boston Police Department's fugitive team. Pena had an outstanding warrant from Suffolk Superior Court for cocaine trafficking, and he was wanted by Dorchester District Court on a murder charge pertaining to Felicia's case. More than 15 years ago, Felicia vanished from Roxton Street in Dorchester, leaving her little boy behind. Because of Pina's arrest, her family and friends who have been searching for her for a long time might now finally have some answers. Pina appeared in court on February 15, 2023 to be arraigned on the charges brought against him. The case has garnered national attention after more than 15 years of uncertainty and suffering. And this most recent breakthrough has reignited hopes of finding Felicia's remains. There is now some hope for Felicia McGuire's family. Police have grounds to think that her remains are still someplace in the Boston area, even though her corpse was never found. With the announcement of an arrest, an investigation that had been unresolved for some time has now received some closure. Though it was unable to bring their beloved Felicia back, Felicia's family and friends may finally rest easy knowing that someone will be held accountable for her terrible abduction. Eventually, we trust justice shall be served. Pina is due to appear in court and is probably going to stand trial shortly. During this difficult time, our condolences and thoughts are with Felicia's friends and family. We can only pray that they find some comfort and peace as they continue to heal from this unfathomable catastrophe. Sofia Juarez in Kennewick, Washington, on February 4, 2003. Sofia Juarez was born into the family of Maria Juarez and Andre Abraham. Andre, Sofia's biological father, was absent when she was born and supposedly opposed to becoming her father in the first place, at least in the early years of her infancy while he was still a resident of Mexico. Maria Juarez, a 15-year-old who had recently become a teenage mother, did not back down in the face of her former partner's regrettable accusations and invited Sofia to move in with her at her childhood home. From the beginning, Sofia was exposed to a large family residing in the eastern Kennewick suburbs on the 100 block of East 15th Avenue under one roof. Ignacio Juarez, Sofia's grandmother, her boyfriend Jose Torres, and 6 of Sofia's aunts and uncles all resided in the same home. Sofia's mother, Maria, had biological siblings who were the aunts and uncles. Due to Maria's early age, her siblings' ages also varied, spanning from toddlers to teenagers. Despite being the youngest, Sofia wasn't the only helpless child playing around the house. After coming to the United States in the latter half of the 20th century, Maria and her family Juarez migrated from Mexico to Kennewick, Washington, where they established a new life with hopes of prospering and securing employment. With the prosperity of the nearby nuclear reactors known as the Hanford site, Kennewick was a promising city. The Hanford site was the location of World War II nuclear weapons research and development, as well as the facility that processed plutonium for use in the 1945 Fat Man atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki, Japan. People moved here from all over the nation in search of a more tranquil American dream-style lifestyle. And the Hanford site contributed to a steady rise in blue-collar jobs. Because of its low height, the town in southeast Washington also has a moderate temperature, making it ideal for people who enjoy milder winters with low humidity. It is located on the Columbia River's southern bank. The Juarez family saw this as the ideal chance to make the move from their familiar surroundings in Mexico to the largely unknown land of America. The optimism and enthusiasm that propelled the Juarez family ahead were only strengthened by Sofia. Despite her shyness in public, she developed into a loving child quite soon, accepting every member of her family. The description of her was that she was a bright, active little girl who could always make her mother, aunts, and uncles laugh until their faces hurt. Sofia loved her Barbie dolls and liked to play pretend with her younger relatives while donning homemade costumes and makeup as a way to kill time when she wasn't the center of attention. Addition, Sofia was an avid cartoon watcher, and a lot of people think that her love of animated TV contributed to her limitless inventiveness and vibrant vitality. In addition, Sofia was well known for her love of hamburgers and for informing everyone that she knew they were her favorite cuisine. Thanks to the Burger King fast food business. These are the only details we have about the little child since. On the day before she turned 5, her happy, animated voice in the crowded family house on the 100 block of East 15th Avenue suddenly stopped. Now let's examine the sequence of events that culminated in Sofia's disappearance. Tuesday, February 4, 2003, around 8 o'clock at night, Sofia Juarez plays with her younger uncles in one of their bedrooms in East Kennewick. Concurrently, Jose, the boyfriend of Sophia's grandma, gets ready to run errands to the nearby convenience shop, which is just a few blocks away from the Juarez residence. Even though Jose doesn't reside at the house on 15th Avenue, he gets along well with Sophia and the other kids who do. Jose asks the children if they would like to accompany him on his brief excursion to the shop a little after 8 o'clock in the evening. The children all say no to the offer, with Sophia excluded. That is, she initially says she doesn't want to go, but at the last minute, she thinks she would want to go somewhere between 8 and 8:15 p.m. But in that same period of time, Sophia forgets to tell Jose of her newfound conviction, and he leaves the house by himself, leaving Sophia behind. Sophia runs through the home between 8:15 and 9:15 p.m. in an attempt to locate her mother, Maria. When Sophia finds her, she pleads for $1 so that she and Jose can go shopping. After some hesitation, Maria agrees and gives Sophia the money. Maria watches as initially scheduled and returns to her evening activities as originally scheduled. This would be Sophia Juarez's final verified sighting. Although it wouldn't be made public until June 2021, a very reliable witness reports seeing a young girl who fits Sophia's description strolling along South Washington Street, the street that runs alongside 15th Avenue and the Juarez family home between 8:15 and 9:15 p.m. The subject of this eyewitness story also saw a second child approaching the girl. This time it's a little Hispanic lad, maybe 11 or 14 years old, and he stands approximately 5 feet tall. In addition, the witness notes that the youngster had unusually huge hands, a baby face that made him appear younger than normal, and black, wavy hair. The witness then witnesses this guy taking the girl's hand and leading her toward a nearby parked van while he chuckles and she sobs. The witness characterized the van as the kind of van you might see builders or painters using. The color is a shade of light blue, silver, or gray that is reminiscent of a full-size panel van from the 1970s or 1980s with outside windows. It's unclear if Sophia Juarez is being seen in this instance. The witness claims to be the girl who was seen with the suspect in van, though when the police show her pictures of a younger Sophia. Meanwhile, at the market, Sophia's grandmother Jose's boyfriend buys a gallon of milk and uses one of the pay phones in the store to make a brief call to Mexico. 30 minutes later, at 9:45 p.m., Jose comes home alone from the supermarket. When Maria asks him about Sophia, he responds that she never made it clear that she would be accompanying him and that he never saw Sophia while running his errands. Maria Juarez doesn't waste any time in reporting her daughter missing to the police at 9:53 p.m. 3 minutes later, law enforcement shows up and starts asking questions about what has been going on for the past 2 hours. Maria updates them on Sophia's whereabouts before to her disappearance. Authorities can tell with certainty that Sophia hasn't just walked off or is playing hide and seek when they consider this information in addition to the low temperatures outside, Sophia's age, and the fact she wasn't wearing a coat. Instead, it's more likely that she was abducted. Following a short while of questioning, police assign other officers to search the Juarez family home, the yard around it, cars in front of it, and the surrounding area. At least 7 patrol officers were dispatched to public parks, open spaces, school districts, and playgrounds in the vicinity. The Federal Bureau of Investigations and the local media are contacted within an hour of the Kennewick Police Department, also known as the KPD, being reported missing. Simultaneously, the state of Washington issues its first ever Amber Alert, advising the public to exercise due diligence in searching for a girl who fits Sophia's description. When the crescent moon peaks in the night sky, almost everyone in Kennewick, as well as federal and municipal government organizations spanning international borders to include the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, are aware of Sophia Juarez. Particularly private residents are keen to assist in the hunt, and many of them leave their houses early in the evening to scour the neighborhood for any indication of Sophia. The KPD is in charge of these search parties, and they use night vision and thermal imaging technology to negotiate the challenging terrain while setting up quadrant searches. Within a few hours, the case manager is appointed to monitor developments and support the search, including alerting the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. States that are nearby, such as Oregon, Idaho, California, and Nevada, also receive similar alerts. Even though no results are obtained overnight, an incident management team is assembled on Wednesday, February 5th, in the morning to carry out further search operations. In the course of the next 3 days, more than 500 volunteers from the general public, police officers, FBI agents, IMD staff, and members of the dive and rescue squad are involved in the search. They use cadaver docks, helicopters, airplanes, and even go through sewers and canals to find the missing individual. Police examine the homes of 2 parties in Kennewick and one in the nearby town of Burbank, Washington on Saturday, February 8th. The mother of the boys who were searched and questioned in Burbank asserts that the police were trying to coerce her sons into making a false confession, but nothing is found. Tuesday, February 11th, 3 days later. The Kennewick Police Department received a report about a sexually explicit phone call between a man from Kennewick and an unknown person. Following the unsettling phone contact, the Kennewick guy allegedly made a strange remark regarding Sophia's disappearance and came to be considered a person of suspicion. Following an extensive interrogation, the individual is accused of telephone harassment, but is later absolved of any participation. The Juarez family home hosts a public candlelight vigil later that evening. There are 300 participants. A few weeks later, on Saturday, March 1st, a NASCAR driver named Damon Lusk decides not to use sponsorship opportunities on his racing car and instead puts a picture of Sophia on the outside of the trunk in an effort to spread awareness throughout the country. At about the same time, America's Most Wanted highlights Sophia's case. Although 13 valid phone line tips are received as a result of the coverage, none of them result in anything noteworthy. A few months later, in May 2003, police issued a BOLO report for a full-size van from the mid-1990s that was painted a faded orange color and had a license plate with the letter J typed on it. Police have attached a profile for the driver of the van, a 35 to 40-year-old Caucasian man with a thick blonde beard, to the vehicle. These reports originate from an eyewitness who says she saw the suspicious driver and the van at the same location and time that Sophia vanished. Whether the man and his van were ever located is a mystery. In the instance of Sophia Juarez, not much is learned as the months stretch into years. Sophia's mother, Maria Juarez, relocates to California in late 2007 or early 2008. She gives birth to a second kid around the middle of 2008. However, on Saturday, January 10, 2009, a tragic chain of events culminates in Maria's death from medical difficulties. 6 days later, on Friday, January 16th, her ashes are transported through the Kennewick, Washington suburbs using the same path that was used for Sophia's candlelight vigil procession over 6 years prior. A heartfelt homage to the young lady who had never given up on finding her first daughter, Al Weiner, a retired police officer from Richland, Washington, was given new responsibility for the investigation by the Kennewick Police Department in 2015. Leading investigator Weiner will take over in February 2021. The Juarez family launched a website in March 2021 that is devoted to the search for Sophia Juarez. It features public access accounts from the investigative teams working on the case since 2003, along with statements urging those who may have been involved to come forward, because they will not be able to evade discovery indefinitely. The most significant development in Sophia's case occurs in April 2021 when a TikTok video goes viral, showing a 22-year-old woman from Culiacan, Mexico, who strikingly resembles the age-progressed pictures of Sophia that were recently made public. The woman in the video says she doesn't know her own narrative and she doesn't like birthdays. The woman goes on to claim that she has heard stories of being abducted as a child and doesn't know where she originated from. She would like to talk to her true family. Over 5 million original views are received by the video as it is shared widely throughout social media platforms by both TikTok members and spectators. In order to assist them in finding Sophia, investigators working on her case are informed of and establish a connection with the interviewer in the OSPLA video. Regretfully, in March 2022, those identical investigators issued a statement stating that they had compared the 22-year-old woman's DNA to preserve Sophia Juarez's DNA and discovered that the two did not match. Even though Sophia's story has gained a lot of attention in the months after the spring of 2021, as of the spring of 2022, police are still requesting any and all information pertinent to the inquiry because it is still a very cold case. Physical evidence was found in relatively small amounts over the first 18 years or so of the search for Sophia Juarez. Volunteers conducted thorough searches for the missing child for several months, but were able to locate a pair of children's overalls and a stray pair of shoes that looked to belong to a young girl. Although they were given to Maria Juarez, the two articles of clothing were never acknowledged as being worn by Sofia. A farmer discovered pieces of a human skull in the Ritzville, Washington area in August 2006. The skull fragments were subjected to radiocarbon dating testing in 2007. The skull was discovered to be around 600 years old, making Sofia Juarez's age impossible to match. As the years passed, the leads from these red herrings dwindled and the case went nowhere. That is, until an impromptu interview conducted on the TikTok social media app in April 2021 almost completely turned the case around. In a recent video, Aspala, a popular TikTok celebrity who conducts interviews with individuals in various parts of Mexico and the US, is shown interviewing a young woman in Mexico. If the woman is still living today, she will be the same age as Sofia Juarez, who is believed to be around 22 years old. She is presently receiving treatment for either an addiction or another ailment when she is interviewed at a rehabilitation facility. The interviewer brings up the subject of birthdays in the video, and the woman replies that she dislikes them because of a tragic experience that happened to her when she was a young girl, though we do not have a word-for-word translation. In response to the interviewer's question on why, the woman says that she has no idea where she is from and that she may have been kidnapped or taken as a little child in Mexico or perhaps the United States. The woman concludes by stating that she would like to talk to her relatives in order to understand her background and the specific events of her childhood. Following the video's release, a few TikTok users commented on the post mentioning Sofia Juarez and pointing out how strikingly similar the woman in the video was to the age-progressed posters created for her. After noticing the discussion regarding Sofia Juarez in the comments, the interviewer uploaded a few more follow-up videos, deviating from the typical material of that TikTok account. He stated that he has informed the relevant investigators of everything he knows and requested additional information from the general public. The woman in the video is being sought out and contacted by the content creators behind the accounts. According to a public statement released by Kennewick Police Department investigators in April, the KPD released a fresh statement in June 2021, stating that they had located the woman in question, but that she was still receiving care in a rehab facility and that they would update the public as soon as they got more information. The woman allegedly stayed in rehabilitation during that summer and into the following year until the KPD released the most recent update on Sofia's case in March 2022. The update stated that the woman was cleared from the investigation after it was determined through interviews and DNA testing that she was not Sofia. Even though the TikTok scenario ultimately resulted in a dead end, it serves as a symbol of the need of raising awareness of cold cases and encouraging conversation about them, regardless of how long they have been unsolved or unlikely they are to be. It might have also resulted in the most significant eyewitness account provided to KPD in May 2021 of a young Hispanic boy escorting a girl who fit Sofia's description to a panel van in the vicinity of around 8:30 p.m. on February 4, 2003. Although the police haven't stated it outright, it's possible that the TikTok video's increased visibility linked this witness to the inquiry. No matter how unlikely it appears, someone could be anywhere in the globe and have the one essential piece of information needed to return a missing person to their family, or at the very least forward a search to the next suitable stage. Because of this, we think that eventually, even though Sofia wasn't discovered through this interview, it will be considered the catalyst for the case's final resolution. Early conjecture on child abduction ideas, particularly those involving large families, frequently focuses on the relatives who were last seen with the victim. Investigators prioritized looking into both Jose and Maria in the Sofia Juarez case. These two adults were the final confirmed sightings of Sofia alive. Fortunately, the mother of Sofia and the grandmother's boyfriend were both able to provide quite credible alibis to the police. Witness evidence had allowed Jose to be tracked down at the grocery shop, and Sofia had never been with him. Although the individual on the other end of the call was identified and had nothing to do with the current issue, some had initially questioned whether his call made from the payphone at the grocery shop would have been connected to a potential contracted abduction. Other Juarez family members corroborated Maria's story, and she was promptly eliminated as a person of interest. When Sofia left the house on 15th East Avenue, her biological father, Andre, was still believed to be living in Mexico. so he wasn't purged of all family members nearly as soon. In order to locate and speak with Andre, the Kennewick Police Department collaborated with FBI agents and special agents stationed in Mexico. Andre said he had nothing to do with his daughter's disappearance while being surprised to learn about it. After investigating the leads, he gave them about an alibi. The FBI quickly established Andre's innocence. After all family member rumors were thoroughly dispelled, law enforcement's focus shifted to the entirety of Kennewick, Washington, and the surrounding Tri-Cities area. Kennewick initially gives the impression of being a little idyllic town that embodies everything that America is proud to be. Blue-collar, hard-working, and a place where everyone can unite to pursue their dreams and improve their own lot in life. Sadly, not everything in Kennewick, Washington, is sunshine and rainbows. Instead, beneath the benign surface of the southeast Washington suburban area is a history rife with peril and tragedy. Kennewick is located in an area that was formerly home to several Native American tribes, including the Wanapum and Yakama peoples. This area was once lush and bustling. Naturally, this peaceful group of Aboriginal people was driven out of the area by settlers in the 18th century, just like every other indigenous population in North America. Furthermore, by the time Lewis and Clark's expedition passed through Kennewick in 1806, two sizable colonization settlements had already asserted their ownership of the region. More sprang up around what is now Kennewick when the Walla Walla Council formally ceded the area to the United States in 1855. Following this, the number of people who traveled the trails to settle in the Pacific Northwest increased dramatically. The Industrial Revolution also brought about a sharp increase in population in Kennewick and the nearby cities in Washington state and Oregon. As previously reported, Kennewick was a thriving community that was selected for the potential Hanford nuclear site in the 1940s. During World War II, one of the main atomic bombs launched on Japan was developed there using plutonium, and a plethora of job prospects accompanied the new. Americans of all stripes soon flocked to Kennewick to take advantage of the city's abundance of jobs and allure as a suburban area. It seemed to be the ideal refuge for both single people and families. That is, for people with white skin and their families. Kennewick used unsettling patterns of racial discrimination against members of any minority, but especially African Americans, under the false pretense of perfection. In fact, Kennewick had a reputation as a sleepy town before, during, and immediately following the American Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Sunset towns, sometimes referred to as gray towns or sunset towns, are primarily white cities and communities in the United States that are known to practice and uphold racial segregation, denying non-whites access to local privileges and enforcing this discriminatory behavior through the use of both violent and coercive techniques. One such sundown town that was well known for requiring African Americans to leave the city limits by the end of dusk was Kennewick. Black people were met with harassment on the town streets even during the day by both plain-clothed civilians and the police. Both black men and women were prohibited from owning land, which forced them to live in East Pasco, another neighborhood in the Tri-Cities, along with other non-white citizens. Kennewick gradually moved away from its terrible reputation as a sundown town, and because to numerous laws enacted by the federal government, minorities, including African Americans, were granted fair and equal treatment in the community, at least to some extent. But this does not imply that the opinions of people who had lived in Kennewick their entire lives changed for the better only because the laws had changed. The town's reputation has evolved in the new millennium, and it now treats all of its residents with more inclusivity and empathy, but the past cannot be disregarded. Families that were raised with bigotry and racial principles may continue to hold these ideas into the next generation. Furthermore, Sofia Juarez could become a victim of a hate crime or other racial incident. Due to their Mexican origin and Hispanic ethnicity, the Juarez family may have been viewed as undesirable outsiders because they did not have deep roots in Kennewick. Given the negative perceptions of Mexican Americans held by some in America as a result of immigration issues, it is plausible that Sofia and her family were the target of one or more individuals due to their skin tone or ethnic heritage. An important refutation of this idea makes use of eyewitness testimony from May 2021. In which the witness reported seeing a young Hispanic kid escorting a girl who resembled Sofia into a van in February 2003. Given that Sofia's ethnic identification was shared by the most likely suspect to this day, how could it be a hate crime? Nevertheless, a person's identification does not completely preclude them from being a victim of a crime based on their race or ethnicity. The Hispanic lad, who might have been a victim of child abduction himself, might have been coerced into securing small children as part of a kidnapping plot. This is a common method used in human trafficking operations to hide the operators' identities. That being said, because of the randomness of the events, Sophia's kidnapping might not have qualified as a hate crime. Even if her kidnapping was prearranged, no one could have predicted her simple disappearance and public exposure to expose the biases of those engaged. Hate crimes are frequently planned ahead of time and made public to expose the prejudices of the perpetrators. Additionally, there was no pattern of missing children from minority groups in Kennewick about 2003. The Juarez family was not the only minority living in the Tri-Cities, as evidenced by the fact that 24.2% of Kennewick's population is Hispanic or Latino as of 2010. No other families have reported kidnappings comparable to this one, either before or since. Of course, a certain amount of hate crimes still occur in communities with higher minority population percentages. This is not to argue that it is impossible due to the numbers alone. First-generation Americans and immigrants are more likely to be the subject of public animosity. Therefore, patterns alone cannot be the decisive factor. Apart from broad conjecture about kidnapping, there aren't many strong indications pointing to any particular outcome for Sofia Juarez. The KPD has received reports mentioning the theory that Sofia was hit by a driver and fled the scene out of fear. The tips include the names and vehicle descriptions of potential witnesses. Investigators have, however, investigated all of these without finding any evidence to support them. One thing is certain. Everyone believes that whoever abducted Sofia or was directly responsible for her disappearance originated in Kennewick. Most likely, it was a crime of opportunity committed by a familiar street person who Sofia would have recognized. Maria Juarez insisted on telling the police and other outlets that she knew the person who had taken Sofia. She went on to note that although her daughter was an animated and vivacious youngster at home, she was extremely shy and reserved in public, particularly when other people were around. She also mentioned that her daughter had never willingly left the house on her own. Was Sofia acquainted with the small child with the newborn's face who guided the girl to the panel van? She might have known the youngster, but not the driver of the van. Perhaps the van driver had been observing Sofia for some time and decided to take advantage of the ideal opportunity. In any case, everyone is aware that Sofia was abducted against her will. It still remains to be seen who did it, because Sofia Juarez was a toddler when she vanished, and there is only one possible conclusion. Her story differs from most other missing person cases we bring attention to. She was taken hostage and did not flee on her own initiative. Nevertheless, this does not imply that Sofia has passed away. There are individuals out there that have self-preserving secrets from an unknown past that they are working to solve, much like the TikTok phenomenon demonstrated. Regarding the actual kidnapping, we are convinced that the witness who came forward in May 2022 saw the perpetrators. Our suspicion is that the boy who escorted Sofia away while she sobbed wasn't acting alone. Rather, he was a puppet for an older suspect who used the boy to entice other kids into danger. We also think Sofia might have recognized the boy, or at least been relieved to see someone who resembled a kid. We can't be positive, but it's possible that the boy was trying to defuse the situation rather than laughing, since he understood what would happen to Sofia. Either way, the boy's and whoever's behavior in the panel van behind him are unacceptable and ought to be held accountable. Sofia might still be alive, and the youngster and whoever he was working with hold the key to providing the most important response. Recall that the youngster seen interacting with Sofia on South Washington Street in Kennewick, Washington, was assessed by the witness to be between 11 and 14 years old, translating to 29 to 32 years old now. The youngster was described as being between 5 and 6 feet 2 inches tall with a light complexion and Hispanic ancestry. He was overweight, and the baby fat that was still visible around his face gave him a plumper look that could be mistaken for a baby's face. There was a faint trace on his cheek that might have been a birthmark or a bruise. The boy's hair was about 1.5 inches long, dark, and curly. The bangs were pushed flat with what looked like grease or hair gel. The youngster was most notable for having hands that were larger than normal for a boy his age. We don't currently know the specifics of the attire. The full-sized panel van was reported as having no side windows and being either a 19-70S or 19-80S model with light blue, silver, or gray paint. Keeping these descriptions in mind, please call the KPD at 509-582-1331 or email the special investigator at allweiner@citickinewick.wa.us if you have any information that could link these things to the overall investigation. By phone, Crime Stoppers USA can be reached at 1-800-222-TIPS. Ultimately, our goal is to return an innocent mind to her family and the world that she was snatched from much too soon. The idea that Sophia's mother, Maria, didn't have enough time to find out what had happened to her daughter and that, like the other Juarez family members who are still alive, Sophia's half-sister would have done anything to ensure that her daughter returned home safely is devastating. Despite her brief existence, Sophia had a lasting impact on those who knew her. There was something extraordinary about the way her grin and her energy filled the 100 block of East 15th Avenue residence. Sophia was there to lift you out of the shadows and into the sunshine of love and laughter. No matter how awful your day had been, had Sophia lived, she would have had a profound effect on the world. An impact that, due to a terrible tragedy lurking in the shadows of the once sunset-turned sleepy blue-collar town, we might never know. Sophia was a happy little girl who enjoyed brightly colored crafts, cheeseburgers, and cartoons. That way, instead of remembering her as someone who disappeared, we will remember her as a real person who might still be alive. Their tale is far from ended. Albert Woolfolk in 2003, 45-year-old Albert Woolfolk resided in Columbus, Ohio. He was married and had 4 kids. Albert's mother and one of his workers discovered his lifeless body inside his home early on July 18th. He suffered around 20 stab wounds and was strangled. It was assumed that the assailant knew him because of the numerous stab wounds he received. A sizable television that had been taken from the home together with a cable box was discovered knocked over. The fingerprints that investigators were able to obtain from the crime site on a cable box did not match Albert's or anybody else's, indicating that it most likely belonged to the assailant. Investigators then drew up a timetable. Ed Albert was last seen leaving the parking lot of a nearby bar on July 16th, according to the information they had. Not long after returning home, he was gone from this life. Years of investigation failed to identify the suspect. The ability to identify a person using fingerprints taken at a crime scene was very recently developed. Alvin Barfield, 47, was the individual whose fingerprints were discovered at a crime scene, according to investigators. It has been discovered by Columbus Police Department detectives that Alvin resides in South Carolina. Alvin Barfield was taken into custody at his residence by the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Unit on January 21, 2021. There are also now further details available. Albert was with 2 black males and 1 white man when he was last seen in a parking lot. It was also disclosed that the television was too hefty for one person to handle and that another set of fingerprints was discovered inside a house. Albert was last seen with a white man who was thought to be Alvin. Now, the investigators are hoping to locate the other 2 males or recognize a different set of fingerprints. Right now, Alvin is incarcerated in Muskogee County. In an interview, he refuted any involvement, claimed not to know Albert, and maintained he had never been inside his home. The statement has been very, very hard over the years was attributed to Albert's wife. You deal with it on a daily basis, and it has been like that for the past 17 years. Moving on to the next case. Farazada Dihagamper, Iranian exchange student Farazada Dihagamper, 27, was enrolled at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. She was a gifted math student in Iran who was well liked by her relatives and classmates. Actually, her success in life has mostly come from her aptitude for numbers. Fier's acquaintances said she had a great appearance and were amazed by her aptitude for math. She would serve Persian tea and amuse her guests with Persian delicacies. Furs made a striking entrance, and it was obvious that this young woman was meant for big things in life. She was scheduled to receive a double major in engineering from the institution. Farizeh shared an apartment at 517 North 88th Plaza with a female from Jordan. August 13, 1983 was the last time the roommate spoke with Farizeh. It was Fariz who had contacted her during his shift at the computer center. Since she didn't have a ride back, she didn't have a plan for how she would travel from the center to her house. Since Fariz assured her roommate that she would call back later, she did not seem concerned. However, Fariz had not returned calls by 11:45 p.m. Her roommate became a little concerned when it started to rain earlier and decided to go look for her. She was unable to just call her because there were no cell phones in existence at the time. She got to the University Computer Center just after midnight, but Faraz was not there. Prankia, another acquaintance, suggested that Faraz might have looked for a metro rail or planned a hitchhike. But people who were close to Fars knew she would never take a rideshare. Simply put, it wasn't like her. Around 6:30 p.m. that evening, Fars was seen by another acquaintance as he dropped her off at the computer center. Farizeh promised him that she would find a way home, even though she had instructed him to pick her up when she was free. When she did not return by 3 in the morning, her companions became more and more worried, but they went to bed. When, at last, 8 a.m. came and went without a trace, they realized that something had gone terribly wrong. On the morning of August 14, 1983, Abu Hassan, a neighboring acquaintance, formally filed a missing persons report. A few hours later, fishermen discovered something strange and terrifying while strolling down the river path, a gravel path. They found Fear's naked body dumped north of Council Bluffs, Iowa, behind a bridge spanning Pigeon Creek. It looked like she had been badly battered. The discovery of her papers and personal items with her body raises the possibility that she was killed by a familiar individual. She would have undoubtedly dropped some of her belongings if she had been abducted or seized at random. Evidence pointed to her having died somewhere else and been carried to the bridge. Sheriff Steve Troga, who was the top deputy at the time, claimed that she had 4 abdomen stab wounds and excessive blood loss from multiple cuts to her throat. According to an autopsy, she had suffered an intimate and physical assault. Officers discovered hair and blood on the railing of the bridge where Faraz was discovered. After being analyzed, it was discovered that Faraz was the owner of the hair and blood found at the crime scene, even if some of the blood did not. It's interesting to note that the blood types on typo and type and objects differed. Faraz was matched by typo, but typo produced no matches. It was the blood of another individual. But in the 80s, that was all you could figure out. In the month after the killing, investigators first spoke with her friends and collected hair samples and fingerprints from more than 100 UNO students. But these attempts yielded no leads. Faraz was last seen leaving the UNO campus at about 9:30 p.m., but no one noticed anything strange at the time. Faraz's unfortunate death was reported to her family in England by her roommate, who then notified Faraz's parents in Tehran, Iran. Iran was experiencing political instability at the time. After being forced into exile, Ayatollah Khomeini became leadership of Iran. Protests, issues, and reforms were all present. Miskia, the UNO director of Foreign Student Services, disclosed that Farizeh belonged to the Marxist Iranian political organization Fashion. However, it was not well known that he was a very active member of the party. Miskia also mentioned that Farizeh was a quiet, sober person who was well liked by her classmates. No one was motivated to hurt her. She was not the kind of girl to use illicit drugs or go out on the run with strangers. A lot of individuals thought that Faraz's incident was motivated by politics. At least one authority refuted the possibility, though. Herb Hawkins Jr., the FBI agent in charge of Nebraska and Iowa, eventually became interested in her case. To find out if there had been a violation of a federal abduction legislation, they opened an investigation. A key question in their investigation was where the murder occurred and what state Farizeh was in when she crossed into Iowa from Nebraska. In other words, did she actually exist when she crossed the state line? Several months of investigation into Farizeh's death in 1983 included working with several law enforcement organizations. Still, in spite of their best efforts, the case eventually fizzled out. Farazeh's case was pushed aside for decades. The true breakthrough occurred decades later when Stephen Martin, a UNO graduate, got in touch with Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Jim Doty. Martin's professional travels took him all over the world, but he never stopped thinking about Firazeh. In fact, he recalled a person in November 2020 who, because of a trustworthy alibi, had been exonerated of all charges in her case. He made a call to Sergeant Doty. Items could be re-examined. Sergeant Doty recognized while the suspect was still out of the bag. Considering the advancements in forensics, he insisted that Firazeh's case be revisited. Using evidence obtained years prior from items such as her underwear, the glove on her left hand, computer documents, and a beer can, Sergeant Doty performed a DNA analysis. The test results provided fresh insight into the case in March 2021. The glove included bloodstains, both the genetic material of the new owner and Firazeh's DNA profile. For fingerprints were found on the computer documents next to her body. They were found to be two. Firazeh owned one while a Uno computer specialist owned the other. Unexpectedly, the code's database's combined DNA index method revealed a match. Bud Leroy Christensen, a seasoned felon, was the match. Christensen was listed as an offender. He had a criminal record that included at least 3 convictions for violent crimes, including one in 1972 for assaulting a kid, 2 adult offenses that were more recent in 2014 and had similar characteristics were committed. And he was also accused of having a handgun in his possession by a felon. Christensen entered a guilty plea to attempted second-degree assault and first-degree false imprisonment in the most recent assault case. He received a 10-year prison sentence. Christensen was listed as a permanent offender. Therefore, until his release in May 2018, the streets were free of him. Stephen Martin was briefed on the situation by Sergeant Doty. Following graduation, Martin relocated to Nevada, where he currently resides at the age of 62. It was amazing that the long-standing enigma would eventually be resolved. Farah's brother spoke with Sergeant Doty for more than 60 minutes. When he learned of the DNA match, her brother was in London. At last, the family had answers. Her brother couldn't even talk or comprehend what was happening since he was so shocked. After 3 decades, some closure was long overdue. On April 30th, 2021, Christensen was taken into custody in Omaha and was given a $1 million bond. He gave up his ability to fight extradition to Iowa, the site of his trial. A first-degree charge of taking an innocent life was ready to be brought to Pottawatomie County for the 67-year-old Christensen, who was being held in the Douglas County Jail. He acknowledged his wrongdoings. Firazeh would have been 30 years old at the time of his ruthless murder. Bud Leroy Christensen was given a 50-year prison term on April 6, 2023, for killing Forrest. 38 years after Forrest's death, Stephen Martin and a few of her close friends are requesting a posthumous degree for her in celebration of her legacy and achievements. She was regarded as one of Uno's sharpest thinkers. They were able to imprison a monster because of the cops and companions who never gave up. Moving on to the next case. Megan McDonald. Megan McDonald was born in 1983, and she relocated to Middletown, New York when she was just 7 months old. She had 2 younger brothers and a sister, Karen. Karen and Megan were closest friends even when it came to movies and little league games. Megan is extremely empathetic, especially toward adults, and frequently comes to the aid of stray animals. Karen met James Whalen, the love of her life, while attending college. James was anxious to meet Karen's family for the first time, but Megan, 16, quickly made him feel comfortable and welcomed, making him feel like a part of the family. Megan was imaginative and inventive. In order to include their cat Pumpkin into the family, she gave him the name James Whalen. Megan was a member of the Burke Catholic High School class of 2000 when she graduated. She continued on at SUNY Orange in Middletown after that. Being near her family made Megan thrilled to be attending a small college. Megan thought about pursuing a career in which she would interact with children because she adored them. The loss of Megan's father, Dennis McDonald, in 2002 was a devastating blow to the family. Officer McDonald was a 47-year-old former detective from the New York Police Department who died suddenly from a heart attack. Despite not knowing that it would be Megan's final Christmas with her family, They continued to celebrate Christmas together in 2002 and never ceased being a family. In a family video, Meghan can be seen putting the bow on her head, tearing into a box of sweaters, and generally being a kind person. It was around this time that Meghan started her first job. It was the first move toward rebuilding her life following her father's passing. Karen thought back to the first time Meghan had paid for her own coffee. Her first job had paid, and she was very proud of herself for that. Meghan knew she could pull through. Meghan made the decision to take a significant turn in her life a year following the death of her father. Meghan signed a lease for an apartment close to Middletown, a Wallkill, New York, small town in March 2003. Meghan had been looking forward to living a fully autonomous adult life, but that would regrettably not last long. On March 13, 2003, Meghan worked as a table attendant at the American Cafe in the Galleria Mall from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. Then, at precisely 3:10 p.m., she strolled over to an ATM operated by Clausby Bank to take out cash. Later on, she was observed at Walk Hill, New York's Greenway Terrace. Meghan was invited to attend a birthday celebration hosted by two of her acquaintances, but she declined. They returned inside and announced to the group that Meghan was going to Middletown with some other pals. Subsequently, Meghan watched friends on TV at a friend's house from 7:30 p.m. to 12 a.m. After informing her companion that she had to get some sleep or she would be late for work the next day, Meghan left for home. The friend had no idea that it would be her final encounter with Meghan. Meghan made a detour to the birthday celebration in the Wallkill neighborhood of Greenway Terrace. Rather than heading directly home, she was seen in her car by two pals who were leaving the celebration. After a brief conversation, Meghan revealed to them that she was hoping to meet someone. The last time anyone saw Meghan McDonald alive was at 2:30 a.m., which was shortly after midnight. Later that day, Meghan failed to show up for her afternoon shift at the American Cafe. Her phone received voicemails from them. Her loved ones became aware that she was not communicating, wasn't answering calls, and wasn't replying to texts. Since she was not responding, her mother asked Karen to see how she was doing. Karen and James Whalen were first a little irritated with Meghan for her reckless behavior. But the more the day went on, the more concerned they were. They couldn't find Meghan, who was last seen 2 hours ago, despite living close by. After day broke into night, they received dreadful news the following day. A man and his nephew discovered something startling the following morning. Something was lying at an odd angle, as noticed by the owners of 229 Bowser Road in the town of Walk Hill. When they learned, to their horror, that it was a body, that of a young woman, they dialed 911 to get in touch with the state police. Using the driver's license, New York State Police identified Meghan McDonald, the 20-year-old who had gone missing, from the body. She had been fatally injured by a blunt object, according to an autopsy. According to Detective Brad Natalizio, the location next to Bowser Road was a narrow dirt track that ended in a cul-de-sac tucked away inside a remote field. Given how remote the location was and how risky it would have been to drive so far alone at night, the investigator surmised that she would have known the person who had guided her there. Meghan drove there with a trusted person at her side, and that person later took her life. After learning that Meghan was the owner of a 1991 Mercury Sable, state police conducted a search to locate her vehicle because it was not present at the scene of the incident. In order to help unravel Meghan's mystery, local police were able to secure media attention. A few days later, the car's location in the Kensington Manor apartment complex was reported to the police. The car had been there for a while, as the investigation found having been parked there since early on March 14th at around 8 in the morning. The driver clearly drove off in a hurry. In order to obtain a proper DNA analysis, investigators obtained a large amount of evidence and removed numerous items. More than 700 objects were stored in bags. Officers concluded that Meghan had been fatally struck by someone who had been seated in the driver's seat of her vehicle. Sadly, Meghan's case went cold for a period, because there were no further leads. Growing up in the neighborhood, detectives Brad Natalizio and Michael Carlotta were aware of the missing woman. For a very long period, Meghan's case was the biggest mystery in the community. 20 years later, on the 20th anniversary of Meghan's tragic death, Her story was highlighted on the widely watched television program Dateline. After her situation gained attention, twice as much work was done. The FBI's Behavioral Analytics section took up the case in 2018 with the intention of creating a theory and creating a profile of the suspect. Following a review of the autopsy and crime scene images and a thorough analysis of case data that included over 800 leads and interviews, their theory was in line with the findings at Troop F Barracks on Crystal Run Road in the town of Waukeil. They came to the conclusion that the offender displayed every characteristic of narcissistic personality disorder. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, published by the American Psychiatric Association, defines it as chronic pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or conduct, an incessant desire for admiration, and a lack of empathy that starts in early adulthood and manifests itself in a variety of circumstances. When Detective Natalizio and Carlotta were brought on board in 2017, they brought a wealth of knowledge to the case because they had grown up hearing legends about the area. Even after changing positions, Nate Alizio never stopped working on Megan's case. Thus, it was handled by multiple departments and people in the community. Megan's age, Nat Alizio was raised in Orange County. Upon joining the NYPD in 2006, his spouse encouraged him to resolve Megan's case in the event that he was promoted. There was a personal link. The detective's wife was a licensed nurse who worked beside Megan's mother. All of the witnesses and suspects were re-interviewed by the officers first. They returned to the Kensington Manor apartments and discovered some intriguing data. The night Megan died, at around 1:30 in the morning, someone saw her automobile. Megan had a black stripe running down the side of her white automobile. Hence, although it was something you would notice, the witness was not interested in it. The music was blasting from the car's system so loudly that she had to glance outside to make sure. Megan's car was followed by a dark-colored Honda Civic hatchback. Due to the large loop in the complex, both cars circled back as the music continued to be loud. It offered a schedule. Considering that Megan was still alive at 12:30 a.m., the crime must have happened sometime between 12:30 a.m. and 8 a.m. According to the main assumption, Megan was followed by two individuals in the automobile who managed to get into her back seat and transport her to Bowser Road, where her body was found. Megan was driving, and they had a friend in the passenger seat with the attacker in the back seat. This person, whomever they were, had some power over Megan, maybe even mentally. They took a car to a remote area off Bowser Road, a popular drinking spot for youths and teens. The entrance was so narrow that one would typically miss it, but the attacker knew exactly where he was leading them, and it's possible that he understood that the region was so remote that any argument would go unheard. The silence was so great that one could hear a distant train engine just standing there. This person and Megan may have gotten into a fight, after which the aggressor became enraged and struck Megan several times with a blunt item. It looked like the person seated next to Megan was shocked. Whatever it was though, the attacker was able to talk them out of calling the police. The two people took her car back and parked it after disposing of her body before fleeing. All of the items taken from Megan's car were examined by investigators, and a private laboratory named Cybergenetics was entrusted with reanalyzing the DNA in 2023 to test the advancements in forensic technology. For many years, Megan has received free publicity from a business called Lamar Advertising. They provided funding for 7 billboards for Megan on Interstate 84 in Orange County and along State Route 17 in Sullivan and Orange counties. They asked anyone with knowledge to come forward. The FBI also offered $10,000 for a total of $20,000, while the NYPD Detective Union offered $10,000 for any information about Megan. Interestingly, the Honda Civic with the noisy system was recognized before DNA could produce a definitive result. They narrowed it down to 2 individuals, Edward Hawley, Megan's ex-boyfriend. The identity of suspect number 2 has never been made public. It was disclosed that he died in 2010. On March 9, 2003, at 1:24 a.m., he left Megan a voicemail with loud music playing in the background. Megan put $1,158.33 into her HSBC account, and investigators found that at that time she had $21.92 in her account. She then overdrafted by $869.92 on March 10th. He acknowledged that he owed Holly $300 in 3 of their interviews, as she had assisted him in purchasing a purple 1990 Honda Civic hatchback. Indeed, the exact vehicle they had been searching for. Edward Holly admitted to having an altercation with Megan on the day of the crime in all of his police interviews. The landlord of Megan came forward to provide more details. Megan's landlord noticed a man enter her flat on Karen Drive on March 13, 2003 at around 9 in the morning. The man whose identity has been redacted in documents was her new boyfriend. She left him at his Wallkill home on Sheffield Drive an hour later and went to work. It's interesting to note that Megan skipped the Greenway Terrace celebration since Edward Holly was there. It was inferred from witness statements and police reports that Megan attempted to purchase marijuana from a number of sources. She called someone at 10:57 p.m. and again at 11:25 p.m., but he was unable to obtain any for her. Once more at 12:05 a.m. She was seen by a witness at the ATK gas station located at 152 Wisner Avenue in Middletown. She was requesting a Dutch, which is the colloquial term for a marijuana cigarette from the attendant. Although she did not see anyone inside, the witness did saw her automobile outside. Megan called suspect number 2 multiple times that night, the latest time being at 12:25 a.m. when she went to pick him up at his Walk Hill home on Cindy Lane. He informed her that he didn't have any marijuana while he was seated in the passenger seat. At last, she promised to acquire some from Edward Holly. Holly was seen by witnesses leaving the party on March 13th, right before midnight. Holly and Megan's phones rang the Scotchtown area towers in Walk Hill just after midnight on March 14th, which was the window of opportunity that the police had for Megan to pick up her attacker. Holly said that he was aware Megan wasn't at the party, but he nonetheless returned straight to his Walk Hill house, 66 Sandburg Court. He was, nevertheless, in the area of the crime site, according to witnesses and the cell phone tower. In addition to having a history of domestic abuse, Holly had a strong financial incentive to harm Megan. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was vital in helping to finally piece together this complex puzzle. It seemed possible that Megan and Holly were at odds. Karen, her opinionated sister, concedes that this theory made sense for them. It was probable that Megan and her ex-boyfriend had a falling out, and that's why he hit her out of anger. At 12:30 a.m., Megan made her final outgoing call, according to him, to Holly, only to pick up some marijuana. Holly is the last person to have seen her alive, though because of this, he is undoubtedly a prime suspect given his background, his whereabouts, and the fact that he never admitted to being with her at the moment of her death. Edward Holly was detained by the New York State Police on April 20th, 2023, and he was accused of killing Megan in the second degree. Holly lost the use of his legs following an automobile accident in 2007. In October 2021, he was already incarcerated for breaking his probation while a part of a drug case. Holly, who is currently 42 years old, would have been 22 when he killed Megan. He cried out to the cameras, telling them he was innocent and that he loved Megan, as the police wheeled him away while he was wearing an orange jumpsuit. In an attempt to express solidarity, his 2 daughters ran to his side as the McDonald's yelled, "Justice for Megan." The authorities have not yet released the identity of the second suspect in the case, who allegedly committed suicide. Unfortunately, a tiny error on the part of the prosecution led to Holly's release without bond. They did not timely bring the case before a grand jury. Edward Holly, though, was required to appear in court in June and August. The day after Thanksgiving will be his next court date. He could spend 25 years to life in jail if found guilty. While Karen claims her little sister will never witness the Friends series finale, Megan's family found solace in the news that the man who brutally murdered her has now been identified. In many of these situations, the body does not recover as rapidly, so the family is thankful they had the chance to say farewell to her properly. Moving on to the next case. Bonnie Woodward, an Illinois native from Alton, was 47 years old. She worked as a carer at the Eunice Smith Nursing Home and was a 2-time cancer survivor. Only 3 of Bonnie's 4 children lived with her. Heather, her 17-year-old daughter, had a fight with Bonnie and was living with another family. Roger Carroll, his wife Monica, and their 16-year-old son Nathan Carroll made up the family she was living with. She was acquainted with them at church. Bonnie was last saw at work on June 25, 2010. Her co-worker caught her chatting with an unidentified man. She failed to appear for work the following day. Because it was so unusual of her, her boyfriend and co-workers became concerned and she was reported missing. They started by investigating the unidentified man Bonnie was spotted speaking with. They saw that he bore a striking resemblance to Bonnie Carroll's partner, Roger Carroll. Additionally, the police discovered his prints on her vehicle. Roger admitted to authorities that he wasn't even in the vicinity on the day she vanished when he was questioned. Police were forced to release him because they lacked tangible proof of his involvement. The case became cold and there were no additional leads at all. That was prior to March 2020. The now 25-year-old Nathan Carroll wanted to report to the authorities what had actually occurred to Bonnie. He admitted to them that he spent 10 years keeping his father's secret. However, he had had enough after his mother Monica was abused by his father Roger. Nathan provided evidence against his dad. This was all he had to say about the actual events. June 25, 2010, the day Bonnie was last seen. Roger and Nathan left Monica and Heber at Nathan's grandmother's house and returned early from verification. Roger noticed Bonnie's automobile as he passed the Eunice Smith assisted living facility. "That's good," he said to Nathan. "She's at work today." Nathan went to investigate after hearing 819 gunshots in her home's backyard later that day. He saw Bonnie lying on the ground, dressed in white trainers and scrubbed trousers, and his father brandishing a revolver. Roger then gave Nathan the command to light a fire. Using a front loader, Roger lifted Bonnie and placed her in the fire pit. Even though all that was left were charred pieces of bone, the two of them managed to keep the fire going for days. Roger also gave Nathan instructions to mow over the grass where the fire was and smash her phone with a hammer. Roger informed Nathan that Bonnie was a horrible person who had harmed Heather. So Nathan complied. Roger said things like, "She needs to go away and never come back." Roger's property was searched as a result of all this new information. A spent 9mm shell case, a corresponding bullet and corresponding bone fragments were discovered by the police. Roger received a guilty verdict. The date of his sentencing is set for April 23, 2020. A sentence of 20 to 60 years in jail is possible. He might even spend the rest of his life behind bars for using a weapon. Moving on to the next case. April Tinsley, 8-year-old April Marie Tinsley was having fun on West William Street in Fort Wayne, Indiana on April 1, 1988 with a few pals. The children were playing when the rain started to fall. April informed her friend that she would be returning home after getting her umbrella, which she had just left at the home of a different acquaintance a few streets away. She was last observed alive at this location. Janet, April's mother, started to worry when her daughter failed to return home for supper. She reported her missing to the police within an hour. That night, a search for April was conducted in the neighborhood around her house by more than 100 individuals, including police and residents. But even with so many volunteers and detectives, they were unable to find April. A witness who was conducting a search of the area claimed to have seen a man in his 20s get into a light blue pickup truck, pull April inside and drive off. A young girl's body was found in a ditch on DeKalb County Road 68 near Spencerville by a jogger 3 days later. Her name was later revealed to be April Tinsley. About 1,000 feet to the west of the body, they found one of April's shoes. Following an examination, it was determined that April had passed away 2 days prior to the jogger finding her body. She had been sexually assaulted and suffocation was the cause of death. Unsettlingly, a sex toy was discovered not far from the site of the crime. At the crime scene, investigators also discovered April's killer's DNA. Despite the fact that the victim's body had the suspect's DNA, matching could not be done at the time due to limited technological capabilities. A sketch of the murderer was circulated around the region based on the witness description, but despite the eyewitness testimony and the DNA found there, no one was arrested and the case was closed. A teenager called the police in 1990, 2 years after April's body was discovered. after he saw some graffiti written in big letters across a barn door. The distance between the crime scene and the barn was about 10 kilometers. The message was chilling. I kill April May Tinsley, age 8. I'll commit murder once more. The statement apparently contained numerous spelling mistakes and was written in 3 distinct mediums: pencil, crayon, and permanent marker. After 14 years, the case went cold once more with no fresh leads. Then, 16 years after April's passing, more menacing and harassing messages with the same handwriting and spelling mistakes started to surface in various parts of Fort Wayne in the spring of 2004. The murderer had written notes on small girls' bicycle handlebars and inside mailboxes. 4 notes and all were located. All of the letters, which were written on yellow-lined paper, were placed in Ziploc bags with used condoms and Polaroid pictures that revealed part of the murderer's body and him masturbating. The words, "Hello, honey," appeared in one of the letters. "I've had my eye on you. I am the same person that killed April Tinsley after kidnapping and raping her. My next victim will be you. I'm gonna blow up your house if you don't call the police. Or if I don't see this in the paper tomorrow or on the local news." Based on the samples discovered in the used condoms, a DNA profile was created, and it turned out to match the DNA discovered at the crime scene. Still, there were no suspects in this case. The forensics firm Parabon Nanolabs received a sample of the murderer's DNA from the authorities in 2018, and it utilized the genealogy website GEDmatch to determine the suspect's kin. See more. A genealogist reduced the number of suspects to 2 brothers on July 2, 2018. When police searched one of the suspects, John D. and Miller S. Trash on July 6th, they discovered used condoms that matched the victim's DNA. John D. Miller was taken into custody right away. "Do you know why we want to talk to you?" the investigators allegedly asked. Miller responded, "April Tinsley." Miller admitted to the crime and described what he did on April 1, 1988, during his police interview. He said that while April was strolling down Hoagland Avenue, he kidnapped her and took her back to his caravan home in Grayville, where he raped her sexually before strangling her to death. Miller said that he had sexually abused Tinsley's body once more after she passed away. He went to DeKalb County Road 68 the following morning and disposed of her body in a ditch. He didn't notice any news coverage regarding the body the next day. He claimed he took a second car to the scene of the crime to confirm the body was still there. Around this time, he discovered one of April's shoes in his car and, as he drove by the crime site, he threw it out the window. He was given an 80-year prison term on December 21, 2018, which included 50 years for murder and 30 years for child abuse. Beverly Potts Elizabeth and Robert Potts welcomed Beverly Rose Potts into the world on April 15, 1941 in Cleveland, Ohio. In 1951, the 4 of them shared a residence on Lennon Avenue. Her elder sister was named Anita. Beverly, who was 10 years old at the time, was regarded as a quiet, reserved, and responsible young lady. Despite her early age, she was a dependable babysitter, had a keen interest in the performing arts, and avoided social situations with strangers to the greatest extent possible since she was timid and afraid. Less than a quarter of a mile from where the girls resided, Halloran Park was the destination that Beverly rode her bike to with her friend and neighbor Patsy Swing on August 24, 1951, at approximately 7 o'clock in the evening. Every summer, the park hosted a show wagon, which featured children's performances. The 2 had been granted permission to attend. For the girls, this was a rare pleasure because the park was usually off-limits after dark. The area was frequently inhabited by vagrants, and the trees had a tendency to obstruct any light coming from the stars above and the streets below. The girls came home to drop off their bikes at 8 p.m., deciding that it would be much easier to navigate the park without them. Then they went back to the park. After 45 minutes, Patsy Swing recommended to Beverly that they start their journey home, since Patsy had a curfew of 9 p.m. But Beverly could wait until after 9 to return home, so she chose to remain by herself in the park. Patsy walked away. When she last saw Beverly, she was observing the performance on stage with the crowd. The show ended at 9:30 p.m. and people started to leave the park. A 13-year-old child who was acquainted with Beverly observed her moving diagonally in a northeastern direction across the park, approximately 150 yards from the intersection of Lynette Avenue, West A117th Street. This made sense because the 10-year-old would be arriving at her front door in just a few minutes after taking the quickest route home. Beverly walked with her toes pointed outward, giving her a distinctive, quote, duck-like gait that allowed the boy to identify her. Witnesses reported seeing a girl who appeared to be Beverly close to a black 1937 Dodge that was idling at the intersection of West A117th Street. The girl was talking to two men who were inside the automobile. This meeting occurred between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. According to witnesses, throughout these sightings, the girl never got inside the car. It should be noted that Beverly was incredibly shy, especially with men, and would frequently run away rather than engage in conversation. If the girl was the soon-to-be missing 10-year-old, then it seems strange that she would stop and speak to two unknown guys in a car. It's possible that the girl wasn't Beverly at all or that she knew the males. Beverly never made it back home. Her family started looking for her around 10 o'clock at night, but they were unsuccessful and called the police. After a thorough search, the authorities were unable to locate the missing girl. They canvassed the neighborhood and surrounding areas door to door in the days that followed her disappearance. They employed a plane to inspect open railway carriages. They investigated vacant parking lots and they tracked suspicious autos. But all of these attempts were in vain. Numerous media outlets covered the story extensively, which resulted in thousands of tips pouring into the local police agencies. The family was exonerated of any and all responsibility for the disappearance, including Beverly's 22-year-old sister, Anissa. Investigators concluded that Beverly appeared to have been abducted since she led a stable life, was content and well cared for, and had no obvious reason to flee. Her father's union offered a $1,000 reward, roughly $15,000 in today's dollars, shortly after she vanished. Considering the 10-year-old's aversion to strangers, rumors circulated that she had been tricked into a familiar person's house or vehicle under the pretense of a babysitting job or a claim that they required assistance with errands or were prepared to take her home. This gave the impression that she had been snatched by a neighborhood resident. But the sole known search of any surrounding buildings was done in 1973 in the basement of what was then an auto shop. But no proof pertaining to Beverly's case was ever found. The 10-year-old went missing, and in the months and years that followed, no credible local suspect was found. Many speculated that Beverly might have been enticed away by an unidentified woman since, while she had been cautioned against unfamiliar men, she had not received the same warnings regarding women. This was one argument put forth. In the years since Beverly vanished, the case essentially became cold and leads became hard to come by. Yet there have been a number of suspects and admissions connected to her disappearance. A vagrant called Harvey Lee Rush claimed to have killed Beverly in 1955 after enticing her to a nearby bridge with candy. Rush gave this statement to Californian police authorities. But a year after her disappearance in 1952, he claimed to have killed her, leaving a gap of 12 months. Rush said that he had lied only to get back to Cleveland after being extradited there. Two retired Cleveland detectives, James Faust and Robert Shankland, came clean in 1980 about who the killer was. They say that in 1974, they were contacted by a man who said he had received a letter from his brother confessing to the crime. In 1966, his brother left Cleveland when he was accused of kidnapping two young girls. When authorities found and questioned the brother, he revealed that he had been living close to the park in 1951 and had a tendency of kidnapping young girls and assaulting them sexually. He said that although he had flashes of memory regarding a girl named Beverly, he didn't remember specifically kidnapping her. Since then, the investigators had been convinced of his culpability. Nevertheless, despite the letter that seemed to clear everything up, there was insufficient evidence to prosecute him in relation to Beverly's case. A former funfair employee from Ohio called William Henry Redmond was another person of interest in the disappearance of Beverly Potts. In 1988, Redmond was charged with the 1951 Pennsylvania murder of an 8-year-old girl. He boasted about having slain other young females while incarcerated. However, he steadfastly refused to provide an explanation when questioned about Beverly by the authorities. Redmond had a history of convictions for child abuse dating back to 1935 when he was just 13 years old and he was in the neighborhood when he vanished. The 1990s and 2000s, leads continued to come in on the case despite its age. A note claiming that her husband had killed Beverly and that she had seen him trying to dispose of the body in their furnace was discovered beneath the carpets of a Cleveland home in 1994. This letter, which was written in 1960, was discovered in a Midvale Avenue home. Real estate data were used to locate the letter's author, who was 83 years old when she was located in 1994. The woman acknowledged that the letter's allegations were untrue and that her spouse had already passed away. She had composed it as a dream of retaliation against her violent husband. Then, beginning in 2000, a writer called Brent Larkin of the local newspaper Cleveland Plain Dealer started getting letters about the case. The author claimed to be an elderly guy who, before he passed away, wished to confess to killing Beverly and abusing her sexually. On August 24, 2001, the 50th anniversary of Beverly's abduction, he promised to turn himself in, but he never did. He apologized once more in writing, saying he would never be able to keep his word after being placed in a nursing home. Out of the 4 letters that Brent Larkin received, 2 included information on the kidnapping and the murder. A letter claimed to contain a rare coin and a sealed brown parcel that Beverly had in her purse the night before she vanished. Brent was promised these things, but as of 2020, he hasn't gotten them. It was determined by authorities that these letters were pinned by a single individual, most likely an elderly sick guy. They were never able to determine his identity, though. There are investigators who think these exchanges were real. An anonymous source revealed details on one of the case's suspects in August 2019. After reviewing the caller's information, the police said they needed more details and urged the person to get in touch with them again. Nevertheless, everything seemed to line up. The $25,100 Crime Stoppers reward has been increased to $15,000. Nearly 70 years later, the unsettling case of Beverly Potts continues to be explored and has served as the basis for numerous books and films. The sad and enigmatic case of Beverly Potts is still unresolved as of right now. Moving on to the next case. Audrey Herron. Ask her friends and family to characterize Audrey Herron, and you'll likely hear adjectives like vivacious, caring, and spunky. Audrey was a part-time nurse at the Columbia Green Long-Term Health Care Facility, a nursing home in the Catskill hamlet. According to the staff and residents, Audrey was very well liked. Audrey looked to be destined for the nursing profession, and her oldest daughter remembered how much Audrey loved her work in an interview with Crime Watch Daily. About Audrey's life outside from her job, hardly much is known. At the age of 22, she gave birth to her first child, Sankia. She then married Jeff Herron, the son of a wealthy golf course owner, and the two of them had 2 more children, Quinn, a son, and Katie, a girl, 2 years later. The people Audrey's family and friends liked Jeff well overall. Sanshaw recalled that Jeff never showed her any different treatment and cared for her as if she were his own child, even though she was still under the care of her real father. Audrey went home for the night on August 29, 2002, after a bad evening at work, perhaps around 11 o'clock. The 31-year-old made her way back to her freehold home, which is roughly 12 to 15 miles from her place of employment through rain and fog. CCTV footage, recovered in blurry form from Cumberland Farms, shows Audrey leaving the nursing home parking lot and driving west on State Route 23 in the Jefferson Heights neighborhood of Catskill. The vehicle was a black 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee registered in New York with license plates X2-33UV. She anticipated to return to Freehold by this path. Sadly, Audrey's voyage is not captured on any additional CCTV, and she never made it home. Jeff called friends and family the next morning in an attempt to locate his missing wife, but no one had seen her. This fact alarmed him, so he called Audrey's stepmother, who worked at the New York State Police Division headquarters. Officers were sent right away to the family's residence and the 31-year-old's place of business. Authorities were led to believe by multiple hints that Audrey wasn't a fugitive who had chosen to go and establish a new life elsewhere. She had abandoned all 3 of her children to start with. For the final month prior to Audrey's disappearance, her eldest daughter, Sonia, then 10 years old, had been vacationing in Florida with her maternal grandmother. The morning after her disappearance, the 31-year-old was scheduled to see a doctor and was expected to pick up Sancha. Family members said Audrey is a loving mother and don't think she would have moved out without her kids. She also never showed up for her visits with her doctor. If she had intended to go, it would have been strange for her to have made it. Law police used a helicopter and cadaver dogs to aid in the search after Audrey vanished. Officers investigated every building, path, and body of water within a 9-mile radius, as well as her home route and other detour routes she may have taken. The mother of 3 went missing and she was never recovered. In relation to the case, over 1,000 leads were followed up on, but none of them materialized. Law enforcement was tipped off in 2018 that the 31-year-old's remains was interred on a nearby property. Nothing was discovered despite the fact that investigators used cadaver dogs to search the area on foot and emptied a nearby pond. Jeff, Audrey's spouse, has faced criticism for his actions after her abduction throughout the years. According to officers who spoke with True Crime Daily, Jeff was reasonably cooperative, but they would not go into additional detail. Although he voluntarily submitted to a polygraph test and permitted investigators to inspect the family home, his actions and other situations have drawn harsh criticism. Jeff reportedly declined to assist with the initial search when Audrey vanished. Additionally, he doesn't participate in the fundraisers that friends and relatives still organize to help them search for the mother of 3 more times. There are also unconfirmed allegations that his polygraph tests yielded inconclusive results. Furthermore, polygraph examinations are unreliable in determining the truth, as we have repeatedly stated on the channel. Interestingly, no one has ever been able to explain why Jeff would wish to make his wife vanish. By all accounts, the marriage seemed content, and neither of them appears to have had an affair. Jeff wouldn't have a financial incentive either, since he and his family were already well off. Sancier has expressed her opinion that Jeff avoids speaking with the public in order to keep the kids safe, and other family members have mentioned that he was upset after the kids vanished. However, a few of Audrey's friends have mentioned that they are leery of the father of 2. A local allegation that Audrey, 31, was kidnapped by Russian mob members is the source of another explanation in her case. This is due to the fact that the Heron family's golf course did, at one point, have a silent Russian partner. Local rumor had it that the family owed this unnamed Russian guy a huge amount of money. Thus, in order to make the family pay up, Audrey was kidnapped. Police looked into this idea and even stationed an officer at the family home in case they were the target of a ransom demand. However, the authorities eventually discovered no proof that this was the series of incidents that resulted in her disappearance. The most recent idea on Audrey's case holds that she was the victim of a straightforward accident, and that her car and remains are waiting to be discovered someplace in a body of water. This is due to the fact that the region she was traveling in the night before she vanished was dimly lit and highly forested. As previously mentioned, Audrey's car lacked fog lights, and the weather was damp and misty. It's likely that the severe weather and low illumination caused her to get disoriented or visually impaired. And that's how her automobile ended up immersed in a body of water somewhere. Audrey was last seen alive 2 decades ago. Her phone has not been used, her bank account has not been accessed, and her credit cards have not been used in the years since she vanished. Investigators observed that they were unable to connect when they tried to ping her phone. Now that they are now adults, Audrey's daughters Sonia and Katie have both chosen to become nurses. When Sonia talks about her mother, she smiles and recalls their fun times together, including going to dinner and getting manicures, as well as playing video games. Investigators claim that while there are a number of people of interest in the investigation, their identities have never been made public. Jeff Heron has never, as far as we are aware, been identified as a suspect or person of interest. Since Audrey's car has never been found, there may have been foul play in her case. Audrey Mae Heron, age 31, was last seen leaving the Columbia Green long-term care facility for her home in Freehold on August 29, 2002. At approximately 11 p.m. Notably, sources indicate that she was last seen in Cairo, New York. According to the Charlie Project, Audrey was wearing a yellow gold necklace, a dark green medical scrub set, a blue turtleneck top, and a white metal face watch with a white leather band when she vanished. She is described as a white woman with hazel eyes, dark blonde to light brown hair, and a scar that covers part of her right thumb. On the inside of her right knee, she also has a mole. Standing at 5 feet tall and weighing approximately 105 pounds, she is a small individual. She is known to smoke cigarettes and may wear spectacles. Turk is her maiden name. She will be 51 years old if she survives. Janet Brouchard, December 23, 1987 was the date. Janet, 20, was having a great time spending the evening with friends when something unexpected happened. Janet was asked to leave the T. Woody's bar even though she was barely of legal drinking age. Everyone else was let in. That evening, a man she'd met volunteered to take her home in his car. After that, she became ill in the parking lot and he wouldn't let her get into his car. For more than 30 years, the details surrounding Janet's next events remained unknown until the identity of the assassin who killed her on that crisp December evening came to light. And unfortunately, he wasn't the only one who brought about Janet's death. Janet was raised in Winslow, a little town on the Kennebec River in Maine. At the beginning of the 1980s, Winslow was home to only 8,000 people. It was a nice area to raise kids in a peaceful community. Geraldine and Albert Brouchus, Janet's adoptive parents, brought her up to be a joyful, intelligent young adult while also assisting her in controlling her diabetes. She required daily insulin shots, but Janet was in charge of the things that really mattered. Perhaps what motivated her to enter the area in the first place was her early experiences with her own health care. She was employed as a dietary assistant at the Seton campus of Maine General Medical Center as of late 1987. But Janet's thoughts were far from work that December evening. It was the ideal opportunity to catch up with old high school pals during their holiday vacation from college. Janet didn't get to see them too much. Less than a mile from Winslow, in the town of Waterville, they made their first visit at a neighborhood bowling alley. The companions started talking to 2 males in the next alleyway while they took turns hurling the ball down the lane. After they had gotten along well enough to want to spend the rest of the evening together, they all went to T. Woody's restaurant and bar with a fantastic view of the river. The bar was located on the concourse's lower level in Waterville. Janet was turned away when they arrived just 2 years earlier. Maine had raised its drinking age to 21. Janet now barely made the cut. All of her buddies wanted to continue the night because they were of legal age. As the odd one out, Janet needed a ride home, and coincidentally one of the men they had met at the bowling alley occurred to be willing to provide it. Though the specifics of what transpired after are unclear, we do know a few things. The man who was meant to drive Janet home went back inside T. Woody's to get her purse, which she had left behind, possibly because she wasn't allowed to go back in. Janet was throwing up when he got back to the parking lot. She might be experiencing it due to her diabetes or because she had consumed alcohol earlier in the evening. It's also possible that she consumed something that upset her stomach. Then the guy who was meant to drive her home wouldn't let her get into his car because he didn't want her becoming sick in it. Then she was gone. When Janet's parents awoke the following morning, they discovered she was gone. Geraldine and Albert reported her missing after trying in vain to locate her and calling around to see if she had remained at any of her friends' homes. A nationwide search was conducted, and news stations all throughout the nation carried reports of Janet's disappearance. The detectives assigned to discover Janet's fate turned over every stone. Regardless of the region in which the lead originated, they investigated every lead that was given to them. They even made an attempt to locate Janet by using her diabetes. They investigated insulin sales that might have been connected to Janet. Regretfully, despite their best efforts, they were never able to advance past square one. The days quickly stretched into weeks and Janet was still nowhere to be found. It really did seem as though she had disappeared. The family of Janet attempted to cling to the hope that she would be returned home safely. Since her disappearance, they have been praying for a call from the police department with good news every heartbreaking day. Less than 3 months later, those aspirations were dashed. Finally, a call arrived, but it was the kind that no parent ever wants to get. A man named Christopher Anthony was checking on his hydropower station at Waverly Avenue Dam early on March 18, 1988. Then he made an awful discovery. A naked body was floating on the Sebasticook River. Christopher called the police, who arrived on the scene without delay. There were barricades along that stretch of river. We did a quick scan along the riverbank to see if anything noteworthy had been abandoned. To be looked at and identified, the body was brought to the coroner's office. They found there that Janet Broskew was the owner. The original investigation did not identify the reason of Janet's death, but it turned out that Janet had not been alive for very long after her final sighting at T. Woody's. A dedicated diving team was established on the Sylvester Cook River in the weeks that followed the discovery. They were searching for any of Janet's belongings or any proof that would indicate what had happened to her in the hours following her disappearance. The idea that Janet had fallen into the river that evening herself remained unruled by the investigators. The intersection of the Kennebec and Sebasticook rivers occurs not long from T. Woody's. She was abandoned in the parking lot where it was chilly and dark. Perhaps Janet attempted to go home, and while crossing the bridge that led back to Winslow, she unintentionally slipped into the icy waters, not being able to get out before being critically cold. However, there was a significant issue with this theory. She was discovered wearing nothing on her body. It was improbable that Janet could have lost all she was wearing that evening to the water's current. What's more, Janet's body was discovered upstream of the river. This implied that she could not have fallen in while walking home, and ended up in the location where she was discovered. Who though had placed Janet there if she hadn't fallen into the river? People in Maine started to worry if there was a serial killer out there as the mystery deepened. It was a direction the detectives had started to explore as well. On May 9, 1986, 17-year-old Kimberly Morrow disappeared from the hamlet of J. Maine, 1 hour distant. She was last observed that same day with a person she had met earlier. The police searched the entire state diligently, but they were unable to discover her whereabouts. Kimberly's case could not be connected to Janet's. Within 5 months of the discovery of Janet's body, another woman vanished without the investigators' knowledge. Furthermore, her case and Janet shared a lot more parallels. Geraldine Finn, then 23 years old, was unwinding with 2 co-workers after work on August 9, 1988. She worked as a licensed nursing assistant at the Skowhegan Nursing Home. Pete and Larry's bar was located on Upper Main Street in Waterville. It just so happened to be that Janet's last known location, T. Woody's, was only 3 miles away. A stranger in a blue Chevy Blazer drove by the window where Geraldine and her co-workers were seated. He grabbed their interest and started waving the 3 young ladies outside. After doing so, they started to go to his car. Then he inquired if they would want to have a swim. But this was no benign request. Exactly. The women discovered he was fully nude by the time they reached his rolled-down window. He asked if they might accompany him skinny dipping. They turned around and returned to the pub to finish their evening, perhaps feeling awkward about the exchange. Quite though it was not quite 8:30 p.m., the gang was eager to go out before returning home. Took a while for that same dude to show up at the bar dressed completely. He began speaking to Geraldine's group later in the evening. Perhaps he made some form of apology for their prior exchange. It's possible that he was attributing it to the fact that his garments were damp from his previous skinny dipping excursion. Geraldine's group was able to engage with him no matter what he said. Geraldine accepted the man's offer of a ride home at the end of the night since she felt comfortable enough with him. Geraldine was seated in the passenger seat of his Chevy. The last time those buddies saw her, they had no idea that their friend would not live to see another day. The next day, she was reported missing. The man who was meant to drive her home that night was mentioned by her pals to the authorities. They talked about his unique mustache, diamond-shaped tattoo on his shoulder, and blue Chevy Blazer. 5 days after Geraldine vanished, on August 14, 1988, a guy strolling along Route 201 over the property made a horrifying find. A young woman's body lay in a forested location near the land he had been surveying. At first, the authorities didn't reveal much about the nature of the investigation, but they revealed 2 days later that it was Geraldine Finn's body. They realized that she had been killed. It was not an accidental death. Finding the man she had last been seen with was now her top priority. They would soon discover that he was Gerald Goodale, a 29-year-old man. In Waterville, Gerald Goodale performed a variety of construction works. Those who knew him intimately appeared astonished by the news when his name was mentioned in connection with Geraldine Finn's case. According to a family acquaintance, Goodale has always been willing to pitch in and help out wherever he could. In response to the news, Goodale's father said that nothing seemed to fit together. There was nothing his son could have done to harm Geraldine. He asserted that his son had a plan for that evening. According to Goodale's father, he stayed at home until 9:15 in order to await a call. He then proceeded to go mud running. It's clear that the detectives were wary of his father's statements. They were not going to believe a family member when they indicated that Goodale resembled the man who was last seen with Geraldine. According to the co-workers who were with her that evening on August 15th, the police started monitoring Goodale before taking action to take him into custody. After being placed under arrest, he was accused of killing Geraldine Finn. Reporters started drawing attention to potential similarities between Geraldine and Janet's cases as soon as the news leaked. The two young ladies shared a similar age. They were all employed in the medical field, and their last known locations were Waterville after a fun-filled evening spent with pals. They were all last seen in the parking lots of two bars that were about 3 miles apart. There were also some parallels between the places where their remains were discovered. The setting was rural and isolated, despite the fact that Janet was discovered in the water. This had also applied to Geraldine's body's position. However, there was something much more worrisome. Goodale had told a family member that he had seen Janet Brochure the night before she was last seen in the T. Woody's parking lot. Given that Goodale had never provided the authorities with this information despite their repeated requests that immediately connected him to the crime, Goodale showed up in court on September 3rd for his bond hearing. The state made the argument that he should be detained until his trial the following year because he posed a threat to society. The state called multiple witnesses to testify in order to bolster its position. They disclosed that in the weeks after Janet vanished, Goodale had been questioned about her case. After effectively establishing their case, Goodale was returned to custody in anticipation of his trial in May 1989. The prosecution felt sure they would secure a conviction when the time came. They had witness testimony pointing out that Goodale had been suspiciously acting earlier in the evening, and that he was the last person seen with Geraldine. But they didn't even have to show that he was at fault. Goodale acknowledged the offense, but he also requested a less punishment. He claimed that his actions were not planned. Geraldine fled from Goodale, and he said that, in a panic, he killed her. However, the prosecution did not want to give him a lighter term. They believed he posed a major risk and should be detained for as long as possible. Even when a judge found him guilty of the charges, Goodale had one more trick up his sleeve to try to shorten his prison sentence. The most crucial detail of all was that he admitted to investigators that he had some knowledge of Janet Barrick's case. He asserted that he was aware of the offender. Goodale, though, was hardly cooperative. Oddly enough, Goodale was never formally identified as a suspect in the case even after this. Goodale received a sentence of 75 years in prison with a release date of 33 years at his sentencing. After that, the years started to go by. Janet's family was soon ringing in the new century without any updates regarding her case. It was 30 years before there was an update. The announcement was made in 2019, the 32nd anniversary of Janet's disappearance, that a cold case team will reopen the investigation into her death, even though her father and mother were no longer here to receive this good news. Other family members and longtime acquaintances were filled with renewed hope that Janet's killer would be found and punished even after all these years. Then, on May 14, 2021, the day that everyone had been looking forward to, a prisoner at Maine State Penitentiary was taken into custody. It was Gerald Goodale, that's for sure. However, what had caused this upgrade in a case that had remained stagnant for such a long time? It was DNA, as some of you may have previously surmised. Response to the news, State Police Chief John Coates stated that this case is the result of years' worth of collaborative work by prosecutors, detectives, and trained scientists from the state, local, and county governments. These individuals never gave up on finding the truth or pursuing justice for the victim, her family, and friends. Goodale, who is currently in his early 60s, received a 32.5-year sentence extension in March 2023 for the actions he took against Janet Bareshu. Goodale entered a guilty plea to the allegations brought against him after realizing the writing was on the wall and choosing not to attempt to refute his role. Other family members gathered to finally get justice for the life lost so young. Even though her parents were unable to attend the court proceedings that day, Daniel, her cousin, described her as a sweet girl, just like the rest of us, young and dumb. For all those years, Janet's family would find some little comfort in knowing that the person who killed her had not been living his life. Despite it not being for her case, he had been serving time. The specifics of what transpired that evening have not been made public. Gerald Goodale will definitely carry some secrets with him into eternity. Moving on to the next case.